Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So today I'm going to talk about one of the teachings of Bodhidharma that at least some people are aware of, and that's the 2 entries and the 4 practices. And it is the best known of his teachings. He gave a number of sermons. I'll talk about 2 of them, and the 3rd of them we actually recite at the Bodhidharma festival, so I won't talk about that. And maybe if anybody's got any questions, we could all together talk about it the first Tuesday in March. So what the 2 entries and 4 practices are is advice on how to practice from Bodhidharma, how to practice the Buddha Dharma. And we can enter through reason. This is one of the 2 entries. That's intellect, instruction, teachings, both written down or spoken. And I will, during this talk, say more about following a teacher, whether it's the words we follow or the example of how they live their practice. We can also enter through something more inexplicable, ineffable, almost too great to be expressed adequately in words. It is the knowledge in inverted commas, in our very blood and bones, that all things, animate and inanimate, rocks, tarmac roads, stone walls, share the same nature. This essence is entered almost without knowing why. It is our Buddha nature manifesting, and this is seldom apparent to the ordinary mind. Why? Perhaps because we're so often caught up in our small selves, thoughts and feelings about ourselves, about other people, and with our strong opinions about the world. Nowadays it's hard not to get drawn into politics, into the increasingly overwhelming pandemic, into discrimination over colour, race, gender, poverty, and into the way we have been and still are destroying our planet. You might find it helpful to listen to Reverend Asta's Dharma talk on the Shasta website. She calls it balancing and disturbing news. Now both these 2 entrances are interlinked. We need them both to find the essence of the Buddha Dharma, which is not always apparent because it is shrouded in sensation and illusion, what Bodhidharma calls adventitious dust. That's to say, coming from outside, happening according to chance, formed accidentally and having the connotation of something extra. And if we relinquish sensation and illusion, we return to the true. We abide in stillness and engage in wall-like contemplation, where self and other are absent, and the ordinary and the holy are equal. This is a state free from discrimination, where we can rest in stillness and without any effort. It's like the thing that Reverend Alexander made. And I have one on my wall, and it is, when the Buddha does all and you follow this doing effortlessly and without worrying about it, you free yourself from suffering and become yourself Buddha. And that, in a way, seems like a description of serene reflection meditation, which has 2 components. Serene, which I guess is letting the mind be still almost isolating yourself from the senses, stopping, turning, and resting within, letting go, relaxing. And this goes hand in hand with reflection, for they're not separate. I would be surprised if you don't find they occur simultaneously. Through the aegis of both, we can then come to know that mind is the source of samsara, and yet, if truly understood, it is nirvana. And we come to know the real nature of things, and then this naturally leads us to ceasing from evil, to doing only good, and to doing good for others. Why is it so difficult to let go of mental objects, memories, thoughts, opinions? If we could answer this question, would it mean we would be able to let go of mental objects so that there is no longer me, a subject, and what I think and feel about an object, one that I see in front of me, whether in imagination or actually it's there. And the object, probably, you have thoughts and feelings about. So see if you can answer this question in Zazen by trying not to use your senses as you normally do, knowing that they're there but not following them. And turn within instead and reflect on questions such as, what is it that sits here? And when I ask that question, then the what includes all of us in the Zendo at the same time. What is the real me? And in such reflection, don't foreclose the process by substituting an answer. Don't seek a solution. Rather wait for a living response. Do you ever find your real self amidst the ignorance and volition, the like and the dislike? This can happen, not only when we're formally meditating, but as we go about our daily lives. When there are such moments, don't grasp after them and then try to cling to them. Rather let the moments be as they are, for each individual moment will inevitably be replaced by the next moment, and in the next moment the real self may seem to have disappeared. It is only human not to want to lose something that seems so precious. To our chagrin and dismay, in trying to return to the stillness and understand the nature of the mind, we oftentimes find it has led us to seeing instead our greed, hatred, and delusion. In your longing to know the unborn, beware of disliking what you regard as the unborn. As not the unborn, sorry. But don't give up. Rather see and acknowledge the subtlety, for instance, of dislike. It may seem over the top to label it hatred, but is that so, or are you making excuses? With acknowledgement, things are able to change, and in allowing the reality of dislike arising, it may be that when you next encounter the person there in front of you, the dislike has already transformed into appreciation. When resting in the sitting, we have the possibility of becoming aware of each and every moment of the mind, every movement of the mind, and see the way this feeds the small self that is so busy with thoughts, plans, assessing the last interactions with someone and whose fault it was that it didn't go well, etc., etc., etc. This seeing in as non-judgmental a way as you can manage, allows you to rest in the stillness that surrounds you, that is free from thoughts fed by doubt. We are so inclined to weave an entangling web fed by our senses, what Bodhidharma calls the 6 thieves, a web that obscures our true nature, which then feels inaccessible, even if we do perhaps retain a faint consciousness of its existence. Very good at making it nigh impossible to let go of the web. When we take the web as being real, and thus the letting go of it feels life-denying. Possibly we may fear that in letting go of the web of sensation we are rejecting beauty. No, not so. There is a greater transcendent beauty when we let our mind be still and accept whatever comes. This is, in a strange way, describing real generosity. We are not isolating ourselves in our stillness. Rather, as I said earlier, we are trying, in a way, isolating is not quite the right word, but keep ourselves away from the senses, not let them run us around. You have to notice them to be able to do that, and then you can choose not to follow them. Then there's simultaneously a deepening in our meditative stance to life, which penetrates the environment. We are giving of ourselves by letting go of ourselves. That's why I spoke of generosity. And we are resting in that which is here and now. Thus we can be at ease, doing that which needs to be done for the benefit of all. Now moving on to the 4 practices which assist us to enter the Bodhidharma. They are suffering injustice and embracing retribution, adapting to conditions, seeking nothing, and practicing the Dharma or according to the Dharma. Suffering injustice and embracing retribution is recognizing one reaps the fruit of past actions, a ripening of karmic fruit, which has to be accepted with an open heart, without ill will or complaint. Doing so, we can face suffering without distress. I had a nice, simple example from my eldest granddaughter, Alex, who some of you know. She had COVID, but is now back at work as a carer in a live-in centre for people, I think they're about 45 to 65. And she is working long shifts each day because many of the other staff are having to self-isolate because they too now have COVID. However, when she was talking to me about this, she wasn't complaining in any way, rather saying that some of the others had to do the same long shifts when she was ill. And somehow there was no sense in her of feeling she was being noble and self-sacrificing. She was simply stating how life currently is for her. Now, adapting to conditions. I guess we all at times can really resent being ruled by conditions. I have a sense that the community is beginning to get really fed up with lockdown, and then we're tempted just to kind of ignore it a bit around the edges. And I guess all the suffering and the joy we experience does depend on conditions. And when conditions change, so our fame or fortune changes. But while success and failure depend on conditions, the mind neither waxes nor wanes. It does not increase or decrease. This is mind in capital letters. And those who remain unmoved by the wind of joy silently follow the path. Unmoved by the wind of joy, which like the wind moves and passes, instead relish joy in any moment, but don't depend on it, crave it, or try to hold on to it. There is a deeper, unmoving place, a place of contentment, which though at times covered with mud is always still there. I would be surprised if all of you haven't known those moments of just deep contentment. And the third of the 4 practices is seeking nothing, not coveting this or that, wishing for nothing and delighting in neither light nor darkness, which inevitably follow one another. When we're deluded, we're always longing for something else, always seeking a different situation. But wise practitioners wake up. They choose realizing the essence over custom. They fix their minds on the sublime. Let their bodies change with the seasons. Realize that all phenomena are empty. They contain nothing worth desiring. Bodhidharma says calamity alternates with prosperity. And to dwell in the 3 realms is to dwell in a burning house. Surely we all know to have a body is to suffer. And does anyone with a body feel at peace? And those who understand this detach themselves from all that exists and stop imagining or seeking anything. The sutras say, to seek is to suffer, to seek nothing is bliss. When you seek nothing, you are on the path. Now moving on to practicing the Dharma or according to the Dharma. And Dharma in this instance, I mean perceiving the principle that our nature is intrinsically pure. The Dharma is the truth that all natures are pure. By this truth, all appearances are empty, without defilement or anything to be attached to. Defilement and attachment, subject and object, don't exist. Again, the sutras say, the Dharma includes no being because it is free from the impurity of being. And the Dharma includes no self because it is free from the impurity of self. Those who are wise enough to believe and understand this truth are bound to practice according to the Dharma. Take care, however, that you don't begin to assess people who don't see the Dharma as you do, so that you feel they must be at fault or you must be at fault. Since that which is real includes nothing worth begrudging, we give our body, life, property in generosity, without regret, without the vanity of giver, gift, or recipient, and without the bias of attachment. We teach others, but without, I don't know quite what to call it, spiritual materialism. I mean, without hoping to collect spiritual merit for doing so, to be admired for doing so. This is what I mean by practicing the Dharma. When your genuine teacher conforms to the Bodhidharma, they really will not discriminate between students. It may look as if they have favorites, but this is probably only from the view of the students. A good teacher sees the distinctive qualities among their students, but they also see the Buddha nature in all of them, and will not dwell on a student's past mistakes. Past mistakes are not carried over by the teacher to their present interactions with their students. So what I'm saying is a teacher, I hope, does not attach to their position as a teacher. When the students receive benefits from their teaching, it is due as much to the merit of the student and not to the teacher's merit alone. Teachings are important insofar as they point us in the right direction toward enlightenment, toward no self. But don't use teachings to discriminate against others, or to discriminate against teachings that do not accord with your own, with what you have learned. Well, then teaching has become another thing you are attached to. And the essence of truth cannot be taught. It must be realized personally. Therefore, I'm saying quite radically, do not attach even to teachings, for they are provisional, temporary, expedient means, good means, but they are expedient. Nonetheless, they are important insofar as they point us in the right direction towards enlightenment, towards no self. But please don't use teachings to discriminate against others, or to discriminate against teachings that don't accord with your own, with what you have learned. Well, then teaching has already become another thing you are attached to. And in essence, the truth cannot be taught. It must be realized personally. Now, these four practices together cover a range of correct views about understanding ourselves, our friends, families, colleagues, as well as our own challenges and blessings. We can use them to find dynamic ways to integrate the Dharma into our lives. They assist us in correcting our misunderstandings and thus allow us to learn how to transform everything we experience into an opportunity to cultivate the path. And as I'm sure you've heard before, practice should not be limited to seated meditation, even though that is the foundation. Only through practice of life will we truly bring forth our full potential of enlightenment. I guess I think about, in practice maybe, the most essential thing is to have an earnestness and a deep yearning to solve one's own problems. I came across something that Guo Gu, one of Reverend Master Shen Ying's disciple, he's a guiding teacher at the Western Dharma Teachers Training Course in the Dharma Drum lineage of the Tallahassee Chan Center. He said, if you have a problem and you can solve it, then it's no longer a problem. If you can't solve it, it's still not a problem, because then it's no longer your problem. I'm not sure I really understand the last sentence, but it seemed worth just thinking about it a bit. And just to reiterate that awakening, the nature of emptiness or selflessness, is our true nature, and it means relationship, connectedness, because all things are connected, nothing is fixed, and everything is free. Maybe the problem is that we do not believe in our true nature. We are so wired into thinking that our views, our acquired knowledge and experience, our autonomy are the only things that matter. Because of this, we're not free. We're bound by our views, our knowledge and our experiences. Rather than turning towards our intrinsic connectedness and towards actions that help others to realize what is meant by compassion and wisdom, we're caught up in the small self's dramas. Basically, what I'm trying to suggest is there is no problem with you or anyone else. When you can sit with peace of mind, read with peace of mind, eat with peace of mind, sleep with peace of mind, meditate with peace of mind, then you naturally save all beings with peace of mind. Try to look upon everything with equanimity. If our judgments and decisions are based on our biased subjective opinions about things, of course the results of our decisions will not turn out well, for they will not have been guided what was good to do for all beings, including ourselves. And the important thing always is just to see if you are being biased. We do have the potential to see things as they are, but sadly we often get caught up with our own self-referential ideas and stories. But don't despair, for when the small self is out of the way, and it is so for all of us some of the time, everything becomes transparent. This entails being clear about different perspectives and functions. Self-attachment manifests as being moved by this and that, as being attached to what we think is right and wrong, or as wasting time in assessing which teaching is the best, or comparing one teacher to another. There's always something we can learn from any teacher, even if it is not to follow the deluded self-referential teaching. In saying what I have just said, I need to stress that I do not mean we should use the Dharma like a measuring stick to judge others. So again, to reiterate, do not attach to anything, even to the teachings, for they are provisional, temporary, expedient means. A teacher should ideally help you to see what is important for you. What is the essence of the Bodhidharma? Your existential dilemma, or a question of who you are in giving a Dharma talk, or who it is that is listening to you when you are talking. Does anybody exist as a separate being? The Dharma Sutra describes emptiness as no attachment to self or to the I, no attachment to other, and no attachment to the interaction between self and other. Importantly, there's a fourth type of emptiness: self, other, sentient beings, and in addition, lifespan or time, which is a subtler type of attachment. It is this fourth type the Dharma Sutra adds. Our sense of time also refers to our actions. We sense time because there are movements, there are actions. All these types of emptiness point to the fact that there is nothing that can be attached to. However, since this necessarily means practice is also empty, does this mean that there is no need to practice? This was Dogen's question. No. Remember how Dogen answered the question for himself. He said, to study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. So we need to engage diligently in practice, but without seeking anything. That's quite an ask. Although we may understand the principles of emptiness, of how things are interdependent, and how we fabricate our sense of self and the world around us, we still find many obstacles to practice. Therefore, we need to go on practicing so that we learn more often how to conform to the Dharma. So it is important to have a real sense of earnestness and wonderment about our lives. We should guard against ideas of how practice should be, because practice takes no particular form. Practice is your own business. Awakening is your own business. The teaching is for us to use, not for us to measure someone else or for someone else to measure us. Although as practitioners we may be useful to the world, this will only be truly so when we're not tossed around by worldly things. When we find the balance Ravnasta spoke of. This is not to say that we become dumb to our senses or to our knowledge. All of our wonderful resources and abilities should be used wisely. Though in the midst of using them, let's not get caught up with ourselves. In fact, let's try to take ourselves out of the picture. This is the meaning of emptiness. Emptiness does not mean nothingness. Rather, it means that within ceasing from evil, doing what is good to do, and doing good for others, there is no self-attachment. Buddha's selflessness is founded on a healthy, mental, stable sense of self. That is necessary as a starting point. The process of practice is to ensure that we do have such a stable sense of self as the basis. And from such a solid base, we can slowly mature the self spiritually. In this process of spiritual maturation, we realize no self. Life undoubtedly is full of difficulties and challenges, but they're not necessarily negative. Depends on how we look at them. They can also be opportunities for growth, for they show us where our trouble lies. Most people have gotten so used to resisting what they dislike and chasing after what they like. This has become second nature for them. We need to recognize how used we have become to being lost in the sea of discrimination. We need to recognize our biases that cause us to perceive things as good or bad, favorable or unfavorable. When we do, as clearly as we can, observe our thoughts and our behavior patterns, we're sure to realize that familiar tendencies arise, that we tend to do things in the same way. Even if we don't realize it, others will. We all need spiritual friends to give us feedback that's hard to give. And spiritual friends don't forsake us or despise us. That's what a true friend is. And actually this is the advice that Shakyamuni taught in Gradual Sayings about the 7 ways to cultivate a friend. So don't be disappointed when you recognize your behavior patterns as being based on greed, hatred and illusion. And a spiritual friend can help you see that. And why not be disappointed? Because when we recognize what we're so inclined to do that's best to refrain from, it does show us that we are practicing and that we long to change. It's not that enlightenment will happen out of the blue once you've changed patterns of thought and behavior that seem so deeply ingrained. Practice is not about suppression. Rather, it is about truly seeing, recognizing, and then vowing to change however long it takes. Practice does not produce enlightenment. Why? Because our awakened mind has already there. It was already there. It is already there. Just ask yourself, deep down, am I really willing to change my views and feelings? For they seem to be so much a part of who I am. They're familiar to us. They define us. They make up what it feels to be like us. This perpetual self-reference is what causes our suffering. The way to let go of this karmic baggage is not to try to cut it off, rather to recognize the self is only a construct, a simulation of our brain based on fragmented memories and misconstrued ideas. I'd like to quote with a verse from Nagarjuna's verses from the center. It's called Self, this verse. What is mine when there's no me? Were self-centeredness eased, I would not talk of me and mine. There would be no one there to think them.